Hello, everybody. So, today, September 10th, we just got finished with the Ubisoft Forward conference of the day. It was at between 3 to 4, and it is currently 5:17 at this second I'm recording this. Ubisoft conferences are always weird for me. I barely play anything Ubisoft puts out, but I always end up watching the stuff they do, because maybe this time, maybe they'll finally announce something either Rayman or Prince of Persia related. And I've been basically off on Rayman for a while because I know Michel Ancel's busy with Beyond Good and Evil 2, assuming that is actually going somewhere. So I was really holding out hope for Prince of Persia. It's been 10 years. And the last conference they did, like 2 months ago, I want to say, there was starting to be a little bit of evidence that Ubisoft had something Prince of Persia to talk about. Nothing concrete, but it was starting to show up, so I watched that one, and hey, nothing. What a fun surprise. I was watching Matt McMuscle's live stream, who was specifically watching it also, because hey, there might be Prince of Persia, and we were all disappointed. So the months went on, and all of a sudden, leading up to this conference, there was starting to be more concrete evidence. First, a listing showed up on a Venezuelan, Guatemalan, some weird country's web store had a listing for Prince of Persia Remake. And that was all it was. We had the title, there was a piece of art that wasn't very descriptive, but hey, it showed up. And before anyone had a chance to say oh, well, this could be a mistake, this could be wrong, Jason Schreier came on Twitter and said, wow, retailers have a bad habit of leaking Ubisoft's projects early, and that was basically the proof, this is real. Then in the days leading up to this exact event, there was starting to be more and more stuff popping up, it was showing up on some other site. The Ubisoft email they sent out to tell everyone to get excited for this had some Prince of Persia iconography in it. And so I was super excited, and I had all the reason to be, besides the fact that I love the Prince of Persia series so much. We didn't know what this was going to be. Like I said, the only real thing we had was the name Prince of Persia Remake and a piece of art that didn't really say anything. Until this morning, that was, when Uplay Russia just had images up for the game early, and they confirmed it's Prince of Persia The Sands of Time Remake. I'm like, oh, okay, now I know what to expect. Great. That was a bit disappointing. I hate leaks. Even if it did help get me excited for this event, I would have watched it anyway. I'm a fool. So I might as well, first, let's just take a second. The other thing from the event everyone's talking about, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is coming back this winter. That's what it was. I actually just played the game last week. I've owned it for years, and seeing as I got my PS3 in 2015, I'm lucky to own it at all. I finally really put the time in to play it. Last week, I've tried before, didn't get very far. I played it in multiplayer when I brought it into club, had a lot more fun there, but I've always felt the game was too difficult. And then I found a cheat online that basically get an exploit for infinite money, which you can easily use to get maxed out stats, and that made the game beatable. I don't like the fact that I had to do that, and I don't like the game that much, but I beat the game, and hey, people are happy to see it, so good on them. I'm not going to be buying it again. Anyway, that's really the only other thing of note, despite the fact that Twitter is trending with Watch Dogs, because, I don't know, people still care about Watch Dogs? I don't know. Prince of Persia Sands of Time Remake. We got our first full trailer showing us what the game was basically going to be. Now, even knowing that it was going to be a Sands of Time remake, my mind was still swirling with what it could possibly be, because we've had some pretty impressive remakes in gaming recently, like things like the Resident Evil 2 and 3 remakes and the Final Fantasy 7 remake have really broadened the definition of what a game remake could be. Like, those aren't just, this is the same game, it's the same events, there are ideas there that are the same, but they're presented in a wildly different fashion, they're reinterpreted, they can change things, add new things, get rid of things that were just bad originally, and they're almost making entirely new games, just in familiar worlds, familiar settings, and familiar characters. Prince of Persia Sands of Time getting that would be fantastic. But I had also heard not from anyone informed, but hopes that people were making that like this could be a Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy Spyro Reignited version of the Prince of Persia Sands of Time games, where it would be the 3 games, Sands of Time, Warrior Within, and Two Thrones, upgraded graphics, but that was really it. The games themselves would still be the same. And I was excited for that idea too. An easy way to get all 3 games looking nice. Not that I really need that, because I own the trilogy disc on PS3, which it doesn't look nice, and it also has some weird bugs, but it works. I have the games. They're fine. But a new way to have them would be great. A new version, and anything to help me force the game onto other people is always good. Get them to play one of my favorite games, even if it means that Warrior Within would basically be the same game and would therefore still be utter trash. I got into an argument on, not so much an argument, but I made my feelings known about that game yesterday in a pretty long post, and man, that felt good. But so there was plenty of things it could have been. And then the trailer showed up, and first of all, started off great. Just hearing Yuri Lowenthal deliver that classic, most people assume time is like a river flowing swift and sure in one direction, but I have seen the face of time, and I can tell you they are wrong. Like, I love Sands of Time. I just know that quote off the top of my head without any prompting, even if I did hear it 2 hours ago. I knew it when they were saying it. So they started off with exactly probably the best thing you can hear at the beginning of a remake that's going back to a previous game. Like the line that game started off with, it was a good way to start the trailer. And then they continued showing the game, and I first started to notice that all of the environments we were seeing in the trailer looked very familiar. In fact, like I could place exactly where every single one of those environments was, and aside from added detail, they looked exactly the same. So, okay, it's like an insane version of the game. Like, the base game itself is still the same. Fine, okay. But it'll at least look nice. The environments do. The character models, not so much. And I had a little time to stew on this because pictures of the Prince and Pharaoh were included in this morning's Uplay Russia leak. And there was something about it that just looked wrong. Like, even in the original game, the original version, the prince's face is kind of long, and I think they did improve that in the sequels. And it looked like they were still channeling that original design. But I was willing to cut it a little bit of slack, because I'm like, okay, maybe just in a still frame it looks kind of weird. Maybe this is just a weird screenshot. Maybe he'll look better when he doesn't have the headdress on and you just see his hair. There was plenty of things that could have been, but yeah, there's just something about the character models, even in motion, the way that Ubisoft was presenting it to us, that just looks weird and wrong. And that tends to be a lot of the criticism and complaints I've been hearing about the game since its reveal. And they're like, oh man, Ubisoft really skimped on the graphics this time. And I'm willing to be a little bit more forgiving than that. I think the environments do look very nice, even if they are the original games. Like, they do look nice. It's just the character models that look weird, and even that's not going to be that huge of a deal when you're actually playing the game, because the only 3 human characters are the Prince, Farah, and the Vizier. You know, the only other named ones are like King Shahriman, who is turned into a sand monster real quick, and you know, once everyone's a sand monster, you can't really criticize them for looking kind of weird. That's basically just how it is. And I'm willing to bet that the look they're going for is intentional. It does look like it's trying to be a stylized look. It doesn't just look like bad graphics. The problem is, like, the Sands of Time games were never stylized. Like, obviously there were super high limitations in the 6th generation, but I always had the feeling that they were trying to go for a realistic look. Sands of Time less so, the later games leaned more into it, but something like Forgotten Sands, the HD version of that is still a realistic looking game. Not crazy amounts, like it's still very much a video game and one that's willing to have fun, but it feels like that's the art style that they were going for, and it's weird that they're shying away from that now when it feels like that's what they should be continuing with. I'm not against stylized Prince of Persia, by the way. The 2008 game is very heavily stylized. It has a clear vision for what it wants to look like, and 12 years later, it still looks fantastic. I just played that game again also in the last week. But it just feels like the stylization of the character models isn't all that inspired. like, I'm not sure what look exactly they're trying to go for, so it just seems unfocused. And the game still looks exactly the same. And then the trailer ends. Like, it's Prince of Persia Sands of Time Remake. That's it. It's just the one game. Unlike Crash and Spyro could say, like, yeah, those games do look nice. Maybe not the absolute best, but they look nice. And they can get away with the fact that they didn't really change much of the original games, both because those original games were beloved and fans felt that their series had been horribly mismanaged in more recent years, but because they were selling all three games to you. So it's the games you know and love as you know and love them. This doesn't have that luxury of that cushion to say, like, all right, maybe we're not doing the most work on a remake we could, but you're getting 3 games out of it. That's a good deal. Like, you're just getting one. And I don't know if pre-orders are available yet. It comes out in January, so I might just check. I'm actually going to check that now, see if it's on Amazon. No, it does not appear to be available for pre-order yet. Okay, then. So we don't know how much this is going to cost, as far as I'm aware. Again, the Crash and Spyro trilogies also had the advantage of they were budget titles. They were $40 each. You got 3 games. It was a good deal. Even if they adopt a $40 price tag on this, like, I mean, that's nice that they're not charging full price for it, but I'm not exactly holding out hope that's what they're going to do. And $60 for a 17-year-old game that is not a full remake is pretty bad. It's a fantastic game. I'd call it a masterpiece, but it's still a pretty bad thing to do. Now, I'm not trying to be as harsh on this game as a lot of other people. I'm generally a very forgiving guy. To bring 2 more games I was playing recently, I really do keep myself busy. I bought Mighty No. 9 again, because I got a physical version on the PS4, and I still think that game's fine, even amidst all of the negative reception that game has. I'm still forgiving towards it. I played Prince of Persia 3D, and oh god, the controls are awkward. It's super slow. Combat's terrible. But with the inclusion of quick saves, so I can easily, I'm not repeating huge sections. I can save before a jump, save before an encounter. If I mess up, I can instantly reload it. I beat the game. I didn't hate myself for doing it. I don't think it's absolutely horrible. I enjoyed it more than Warrior Within and Battles of Prince of Persia, even if it's a worse game than Warrior Within. Verdict's still out on Battles of Prince of Persia. That is a bad game. So I'm generally a forgiving guy. I'm willing to bet that the developers at Ubisoft were probably doing the best they could with this. I was just sort of curious last night. I was reading about the canceled Prince of Persia games last night while I was laying in bed. There's not too many, actually. There was the original version of Two Thrones, an early version of 2008, Assassins, and Redemption. That's the one that was like made headlines this year for a demonstration video that had been on YouTube for 8 years and people just discovered it. Weird stuff, but there's not too much of that. And I believe one of the developers that had worked on Redemption had said, like, yeah, Ubisoft is quicker to cancel Prince of Persia related projects because they don't own the full license to the property. There's still a certain amount that's owned by Jordan Mechner. And I mean, first off, good on him. I'm glad he managed to retain a bit of creative control in the franchise. He has not exercised it in a long time. He has not touched the games since Sands of Time, and I don't know how much input he ended up having in the final version of the movie, which also, let me just say, that movie is good, all right? That is a fun movie, and I still think it's the best video game movie. I enjoy it. Whatever. So, like, Ubisoft doesn't see a Prince of Persia game as sound of a business investment as Assassin's Creed. I imagine probably a couple years ago it might have been safer when people were really burned out on Assassin's Creed, but now that it's started to make a comeback with Odyssey and Valhalla, it's probably not as safe an investment as doing an original game like that, or a Ubisoft fully owned IP like that. It's been 10 years since the last Prince of Persia game, and there's been basically nothing to fill that gap. There's been like 2 mobile games. Like, one of them was Escape, which isn't that, I have it, it's not that good. Another one I just completely missed. A mobile remake of Prince of Persia 2 that's also completely missing, and I can't tell you how that is. They released the trilogy for PS3 in like 2011. But other than that, there's been almost nothing Prince of Persia in all that time. The Sands of Time was made backwards compatible on Xbox One. Again, there's basically been nothing. It's very much fallen out of the gaming zeitgeist that it was in during the Sands of Time era. So I imagine that this wasn't as safe an investment. And Ubisoft is doing this as making a game sort of on the cheap as a way to gauge interest in the franchise and see where to go from there. I'm willing to bet that's the case. The developers are making the best of the budget they were given. Like, the idea was probably like, all right, let's remake Sands of Time, but we won't go too far on it. We don't want to mess up this game, and we don't have the budget probably to make a great game. They might have had an idea for the visuals that just didn't come all the way through. Again, I think the environments do look nice, but the character models, again, are still pretty weak. And because of that, I feel like if this game does well, Ubisoft will have a renewed faith in the series, and if they do something else with it in the future, then it'll probably have a bit more to work with. Now, what that next thing could be, I don't know. If it's a Warrior Within remake, I really hope they put that extra effort into remaking the game and making it different so that it's good. I will stay on that no matter what anyone says. Maybe they'll make a sequel to 2008 to finally close out that timeline. Honestly, I'm saying if they wanted to really make a cheap game, they should have just remastered 2008, because that game did not get the reception it deserved. That is even with a dedicated group of Prince of Persia fans that love that game like I do, that is a very criminally... Wow, it is really raining out there. That is a very criminally underlooked game. And that is overlooked, I should say, underappreciated game. And I feel like it deserves a second chance. A remaster of that would also specifically gauge interest in that series so they could finally close it off. I could go on for that for a while, maybe, or maybe I already said everything. Or maybe if they made a new project, it would just be another reboot, which I think would also be a good idea, because frankly, Ubisoft has clung on to Sands of Time for too long. I think that series... I prefer a remake to them making a new game in the series. Like, even Forgotten Sands was a bit iffy on them trying to do another Sands of Time game, but I'm willing to forgive that one because it was specifically meant to be a cross-promotional tie-in with the Sands of Time movie. But that series is done. Remakes are fine, but if they're going to make something new, do something new. So, if this game does well and it leads to that, then hey, that's great. This will be, I think, an adequate first step. I could be like, they made Sands of Time. It wasn't exactly the best thing they could have done, but it led to better projects, so whatever. It's like with the when Mega Man Legacy Collection came out. It's like, yeah, okay, it's just a cheap collection of the first 6 Mega Man games. It doesn't even include the bonuses that Mega Man Anniversary Collection had, like 7, 8, the arcade games, extra stuff, and some cool extra stuff in the gallery, like the first episode of the amazing Ruby Spears cartoon, if you're playing the PS2 or Xbox version. So it was still kind of cheap, but it led to Legacy Collection 2, which finally gave us physical versions of 9 and 10, X Legacy Collection, 0 and ZX Legacy Collections, which have given me hope that we're going to get more collections. Please, I still haven't played the Battle Network games. Give me a collection of that. And, of course, Mega Man 11, plus the nothing officially confirmed yet, but I'm convinced that they're working on X9. TGS is later this month. Proto-Dude said on Twitter, don't expect much. This year has been hard on all of us, but rest assured I'm an inside man. They're doing something. I feel like that's coming along, and with Capcom high in its redemption arc, I think we can say, like, hey, Mega Man Legacy Collection was a start to that. It showed that, hey, it sold well, people are still interested in Mega Man, and I'm hoping that Ubisoft is aiming with the same goals for Sands of Time Remake. Now, does that fully excuse what they're doing here? No. Sands of Time deserves more, and if they were just going to do a remake in this style, first of all, it looking better would be appreciated. Like, I've seen people on Reddit saying, like, oh, wow, they finally upgraded the PS2 game to look like a PS3 game. Uncharted 3 looks better than this, and the first criticism, I think, is a bit harsh. I think it does still look alright. Second one's not entirely wrong, but Uncharted 3 did look very nice. I will give it that. So if they were going to go this route of faithfully translating those games, I wish it would have been a trilogy. Or if they just wanted to focus on Sands of Time, I wish that they had given it a full Resident Evil 2 or 3 or Final Fantasy 7 complete overhaul treatment. But I think that they're doing what they can, and I'm hoping it leads to something better. If it does, then this will be a first step. If it doesn't, then hey, remember that time Ubisoft remade Sands of Time, and it was a fine game, but it was kind of weird that they just did that and then did nothing else with it? And the reason I'm saying I don't think it's going to be bad is because it is still that core game. Regardless, the level design, the story, the platforming are all still going to be as good as they were. And the combat, I wonder. What they showed in the trailer didn't look wildly different from what Sands of Time originally did. Someone working on the game, whatever position they were in, said that, hey, we're revamping it. So maybe there's a chance they'll balance it. I've said this plenty of times. I like the combat in Sands of Time because while the Prince is very limited in his movement abilities, he's slow in combat, he doesn't have that many options. The enemies are similarly limited, so it's not unfair like Warrior Within. And the fact that you can break that game 6 ways to Sunday. Like, seriously, if you're not super familiar with Sands of Time, vault over an enemy, slash them once to weaken them, and then stab them with the dagger on the way down. If they block the dagger, slash them twice to knock them to the ground, and then hit them with the dagger. If they knock you off when you're trying to vault over them, go over to a wall, jump off it, and plunge forward with the sword to knock them down, then stab them with the dagger. Those 3 moves will get you through literally every single enemy in the game. More balance would be pretty nice, though at the same time, combat in Prince of Persia is always bad. At least it being easy makes it easier to get through. There's a chance they could fix that one glaring sore spot. There's also a chance they could include some of the quality of life changes that later games in the series had, like Warrior Within started not having fall damage, like you either land fine or you die, and I think that's a fair thing to keep. I'm sure if they keep in the original design, they won't also bring back the other Warrior Within change that I liked, where save points were also full health restores. That was appreciated. I'm sure that won't make its way back, but maybe they'll also include like an easy mode where enemies deal less damage, which could help newer players get accustomed to the combat and get them through the elevator. Because, again, I can speak from experience, if you don't know what you're doing and you don't know how to break the combat, that place is hell. But it doesn't seem like the game is going to be that different, but I love Sands of Time. It's in my top 11 favorite games ever. It is a masterpiece, I feel like it, even with some of its kind of major faults, like the combat not being fun. The fact that some of the level design is kind of weird. Because it's still, the platforming is still really good, and you don't fully appreciate that until you play a lot of the other games, and there's just something about them that doesn't click, and you realize, like, wow, Sands of Time just clicked for some reason. Something about it just worked. The story was fun. I enjoyed it. I like the interactions between the Prince and Farah, though I am now spoiled by the interactions between the Prince and Elika in the 2008 game. Those are phenomenal, amazing, and these ones don't quite live up to it. But we've at least shown that we're still going to be getting some of that, and I appreciate the fact that the trailer also showed that they're continuing Prince of Persia tradition where all of the voice actors are going to change game to game, but Yuri Lowenthal, aside from Warrior Within, where he was weirdly replaced by Robin Atkin Downs, he is always going to be there as this version of the Prince. Like, it's hilarious. Like, I heard him talking, I'm like, good, they got the classic voice of the Prince back. Gotta have that. And then Farah starts talking in the trailer. I'm like, that's definitely not the same voice. I don't know if it's the same voice from the Two Thrones. I'm going to say no, because I believe in all the Sands of Time games, the Prince is the only voice actor that does anything. Like, he's the only one I've ever heard of outside of these games. So I'm glad they're continuing that tradition. It makes me feel right at home in its weirdness. And that's fair, because he was the best actor in the game. If you're going to bring anyone back, he's a good choice. Now, I understand that this sort of reaction is very much premature. We've seen one trailer at this point, and now granted, that one trailer was intended to sell us on the game, and the game's coming out in January, so they don't have that much time to touch it up, which is weird, because they said in the trailer, like, this is alpha footage of the game. It's like, that seems a little bit early for a game that is 4 months away from being completed. I think it's technically more accurate, because I think beta specifically refers to as, like, feature complete. It is just going through quality control now, and alpha refers to everything before that. So it technically might be accurate, but it still seems a little bit weird. So I don't know if the game's like really going to be rushed or if there really might be a difference. And I really hope that Ubisoft doesn't try to fill in the gaps with their own brands of bullshit. Like, if they're sticking to the design of the original game, there's really no place that they can put in DLC, microtransactions, any of the weird stuff they always do. And I think pre-orders even are going to be pretty limited, because they said at the end of the trailer, like, pre-order the game to get the Classics pack, which is like classic skin for the Prince, which, let me just say, is also something they've milked, because the 2008 game, you had a skin that just let you play as that model of the Prince. The remake of the very first game on PSN, you just played as that model of the Prince. The Wii version of Forgotten Sands, you had an alternate costume that was just the original model. Like, they've milked that a bit, and if people are complaining about the graphics in this game, it is going to be really weird to just be able to switch back to these beautiful environments, these two other weird-looking but decently well-constructed characters, and then just a GameCube PS2 version of the Prince. It might be hilarious, and I sort of hope that there's still the weird clipping. It was more evident with Farah in the original game, where, like, during the scene where she's slipping towards the end of the game and the Prince is holding onto the dagger to try and keep her up, like, you can see her eye is sort of clipping through her eyelid. That could also just be a problem with the HD version. I have no idea. And I also just want to say they're really banking on nostalgia with this trailer, because, man, they showed scenes from, like, everywhere in the entire game. Like, they showed... I mean, I can't really... I understand it's not much point in spoiling, but they showed various areas from late in the game. The one bit of the motion capture they showed is, I'm pretty sure, from the final cutscene, though they don't give context in the trailer. So they're definitely trying to sell this to people who remember the original game and not so much a new audience. Which, I mean, probably won't do very well in getting people interested, which is a shame. But I mean, I'm gonna buy it. If it's $60 at launch, maybe not, because as much as I love this game, $60 might be asking a bit too much. If it's $40 at launch, I probably can justify it to myself. It's a Ubisoft game, so even if it's $60 at launch, it'll probably drop in price pretty quick. And it's not like I have to worry about spoilers. I mean, it's a game I know front to back. I'll pick up the game and I'll judge it on a couple different merits. It's going to be either I trust that the game is going to be as good as I remember it. So my merits are going to be, is it glitchy? Like, is it a worse to play experience than the original game? And if they do make any changes, which I'm sure I'll be able to spot immediately, how many of them work to the game's favor? And how many of them are like, I'm not really a fan of that change, while trying not to be blinded by just the game I know. And if it turns out great, then if it turns out functional, and that's basically it. If it turns out functional, then I'll say, hey, I'm fine with this. I'm happy to get a better looking version of the game I love. And I hope that my money will lead to Ubisoft seeing, hey, Prince of Persia still has an audience. I think there are still better ways, but it'd be nice to have a definitive version of Sands of Time, because for a long time I was saying, like, yeah, man, I'd love to recommend Sands of Time to people, but man, there's no great version. Like, you can get the GameCube, PS2, Xbox versions, and they're fine, but you got to deal with the fact that you're playing them on an old console that you're only playing through, like, composite cables. You could play the Xbox version through backwards compatibility on the 360, but 360 backwards compatibility is kind of iffy, and the extra unlockable games, which are a big bonus for the Xbox version, apparently don't work. You could get the PC version, which is easily available for cheap on Steam and GOG, but it's the exact same PC version that was released in 2003 and infamously has some bad issues with modern operating systems. There's a sort of famous story about a speedrunner who was playing the game at AGDQ, and it crashed on him like 5 times throughout the night. Granted, some of that was because he was clipping out of bounds and doing stuff, but I don't exactly trust how well it works, and I think I heard like the controller support is real weird, but I honestly wonder, because Prince of Persia 3D that I just played, honestly, controller support in that game, despite its weird-ass controls, I got to work fine. So either way, if Sands of Time on PC had good controller support, that's real important, because don't play that kind of game with a keyboard. The PS3 version gives you HD widescreen and more modern platform, and the other 2 games in the trilogy. That's nice, but it's not a great remaster. There's audio issues. Sands of Time, I've always historically complained that version, like, you can't hear the inner monologues. That's a problem because they're not subtitled. And then I discovered that if I go into the PS3 settings and drop the sound from Dolby 5.1 to Dolby True HD, I could hear them fine. So I don't know if the problem is actually the collection being badly, the sound being badly mixed, or if it's just I'm trying to push Dolby 5.1 through my HDMI cable to a speaker setup beneath my TV that was made 20 years ago. So it could be that. Until now, the best way to play the Sands of Time was the original Xbox through backwards compatibility on Xbox One, especially X, because you get the high quality of the Xbox One's backwards compatibility. You get it really high up-res, like I think maybe it can go up to 4K on the One X and at least 1080p solid on the normal Xbox One. And you get the 2 extra bonus games, which, again, a great bonus for Xbox fans because it's the easiest way to get Prince of Persia 2. I'm trying to get that for my collection, and the cheapest way to get it on eBay is buying a Prince of Persia collection disc of the first 2 games, and that still costs like $30. So, yeah, it's all bad stuff, but whatever. So, if it's the same game I know and love, and it's going to look nicer than the PS2 game. It's got a charm in terms of, like, yeah, it looks of its time, but it's not exactly a pretty-looking game. Again, the environments in the original game look pretty good, too, and the character models were a little bit weak, so I guess they're just paying true to that. So those are basically my standards. If it looks good, and if it looks all right, and it plays just as good as the original, and any of the changes are not detrimental to the experience, then I'll say, hey, it's great, I recommend it, it's a game I adore, please play it. Though I would probably still say it's not that different from the original, you can still get by with the original, and I still think the PS3 collection is, aside from Two Thrones being buggy as all hell, that maybe I was just really unlucky, is a solid collection. If you have the way to get that, I'd say that's still good. But it could be good. It could also be a bit of a disaster, and I worry that either that or just the general negative reception it's getting already is going to scare Ubisoft away, because people just looking in on it, not super familiar with Sands of Time, are just going to be like, why does this game look bad? Oh, it's just a remake of a game 17 years ago. Why is it by itself? Why are they charging this much money for it? And the people that are more willing to take a jump at it are going to say, like, yeah, all right, it's Sands of Time, but it's not that much different from the original, so it's not a necessary purchase. So I worry sales are going to be kind of low, and that would prompt Ubisoft to not go with it in the future. Though I understand a lot of people would not have the same optimism as I do, and just putting this out there, I have not bought a Ubisoft game since Rayman Legends in 2013. I just don't care about a lot of the stuff they put out, so maybe they are just a horrible, horrible company nowadays, but I like to think that Ubisoft knows the kind of game they're putting out. They know the money they put into it, so they're not expecting that much. I'm hoping there's enough of Prince of Persia fans that are like, listen, I understand this isn't the greatest, but I want a new game, and I want to play Sands of Time again. And enough new people that are like, okay, I've heard great things about Sands of Time over the years, but either I just can't go back to those old graphics or I don't own those older consoles. This would be a good way to sort of introduce them to it and get them clamoring for more Prince of Persia the way we all have been for the last 10 years. And I hope that it'll actually give us something. Now, I'll keep an eye on the game, looking at a couple more trailers leading up to its release. I'm probably not going to see too much else of value aside from, hey, maybe the graphics are going to get a bit better. Like, it stands a time. I'm just, unless they come out and say, like, hey, here are the changes we're making to combat, I'm probably not going to see too much. And I don't know, maybe I'll come back with a quick video once the game is out and I've played it to give my final verdict on it. But it's a little bit disappointing, but regardless, it's a bit of a Pyrrhic victory if you want to look that word up. Like, hey, I'm getting a new Prince of Persia game. It's a remake of the best Prince of Persia game, and there's a chance that it'll lead to more. But this game does deserve better. I would like it more, but at some point, you got to cut your losses. You got to take what you can get. And if it doesn't lead to anything, I'll keep complaining. I'll keep working on building up my collection. I'm so close. I just need Prince of Persia 2 and Sands of Time GBA, and then I will own every Prince of Persia game. And then I have full right to complain to them more, because it's like, oh, no, there aren't older Prince of Persia games to play. I did it. Give me more. And I think that's about all I have to say about this. I'm cautiously optimistic, I feel is the best way to say it, and I hope that the rest of you guys can be a little bit more forgiving, a bit more understanding of the circumstances that are likely behind this game's development. And I hope that if it fits within your budget, you're willing to give this game a chance. Unless you're a Switch owner, which is really weird because the original leak of this game, when it was put on whatever that country's website was, said it was going to be released for PS4 and Switch. And I never believed that was going to be those were going to be the only platforms, because, hey, it's a Ubisoft game. I'm sure it's going to be on Xbox. I'm sure it'll be on PC. But no, apparently it's not coming to Switch, and I'm decently sure it's not too demanding. I can only assume it's just because Ubisoft really does not care about the Switch. Which, actually, now that I'm saying that, how many Ubisoft games are on the Switch? Like, there was Rayman Legends Definitive Edition, Mario and Rabbids. Of course, they put in the Just Dance stuff on there. Rest in peace, Just Dance 2020 not coming to the Wii. Or the Wii U. We're all dead. But that's weird that they would still leave a console like that out. But please, I'm not saying you have to buy the game, but give it a chance. Don't be so dismissive. I feel like this could very well be the kind of game that is going to get a bad reputation because of its visuals and the way it's presented to us, and because it's not a meaningful improvement on the original game, which doesn't have the same following behind it that the hype of Crash and Spyro would have gotten. But I want to believe, guys, all right? If nothing else, just let me have this, okay? I just want this. I want this so much. I want the hope that all of the games I adore are going to continue to be brought forward to modern consoles. Because, hey, Mega Man X has been brought forward. Mario Galaxy is being brought forward, even if that's also a very lackluster collection. Wind Waker HD, it was brought forward. I don't know if it's going to get brought forward again. I hope so. No More Heroes, there's rumors of that getting brought forward. Let me hope for games like Ghost Trick and Rocket Knight Adventures. Konami, please, Rocket Knight Anniversary Collection. It can't be that hard, and you'll make some money out of it. I'll buy it. Let the games I love continue to live on, because frankly, some of us have just been waiting too long.